So, morena tātou ko Glenn Baillie-Price toko ingoa. Good morning, everybody. My name is Glenn Baillie-Price. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. The empath in me, I had tears in my eyes. And I always think internal comms is really the people business, and we're here because we care. And I got into internal comms when it was my first job when I was 21. And I had the goal that I wanted to make one person's day better at work. And if I achieved that, then I'd done a good job. And I thought when I was preparing for today, if I can give you one useful thing that you can take back and apply, then I feel like I've done a good job. So thank you for being here. Thank you for your interest. Just a little bit about me, just so that you know who you're talking with. So yeah, as I say, I started life in the private sector as an internal communications coordinator. I think it might be New Zealand's first, I don't know. I started a consultancy called the Right Message Company in the late 90s, and that was an internal comms consultancy. It was here in Wellington. It was a different place back then. We had, telecom. Our first client was what was called the New Zealand Dairy Board, and so on. So, there was a real appetite for internal comms support. I lived in Australia for some time, and I did similar work there under the banner of Priceless Communications. So I've sort of done corporate and consultative comms. I've also been where perhaps some of you are, and I've been a small business. I've worked with small businesses to help them with their marketing communications and things like that. So I kind of know what it's like to be a one-man band. And the other thing about internal comms that sort of characterises it is that it's often, and I know this sounds a bit negative, but it's often a bit of a poor cousin. It's not as glamorous. Sometimes, we often don't get the budget and things like that. So I know that whole situation that many of you may be in of having to do more with less and trying to do it all yourself. So I've tried to tailor today so that it is nice and practical, as Louise said. And I've been in the public sector for about a decade. So what is internal comms and why does it matter? So essentially it's got a few different functions, and the role of internal comms will differ depending on where you work or where you volunteer. So I guess the point for you is to think about what is the value that it holds for the enterprise or where I am, and how can I bring that through. So it's a few things, as I say. Internal comms, it connects and informs people within a business or an organisation, whatever it is. It's about, as the name says, it says what it is on the tin. It's comms within an enterprise or a business. It can be operational, so just telling people, stuff that's going on that they need to know about. It can be informing and educating. So bringing, people will often talk about bringing people along on the journey. Well, how do you do that? You do that with internal comms. It also has the ability, if you do it right, to be inspiring and empowering. If you can connect in with that, how can I make someone's day better vibe, and try to, information is power, and by giving people the right information at the right time and the right way, you can really empower people within their workplace. So, why does it matter? I've touched on it. It's the people business. We're in the people business with internal comms, because what is a business or any kind of operation without the people? It informs and influences people. So there's always lots of stuff that, the powers that be need people to know. I often say internal comms can be a bit of a volume game, that there's a whole lot of information. It's like, we need to tell people this, we need to tell them that. And so, there's that operational information pipeline sort of aspect to internal comms. It also builds brands and consumer experiences. I always say that brands, they're born or they grow from the inside out. So if you think about your experience with a brand, it doesn't matter what it is, um, could be a bank, and you know see an ad, or you're thinking about changing banks, and you speak with an employee of that bank, and you have a really great experience. That influences your perception of that brand, right? So, because a brand is any sort of way that we touch, feel, interact with whatever it is. So a brand is really powerful, and people are a real, the employees of that organisation are like the brand ambassadors, basically, aren't they? So that's where internal comms can really support marketing, sales, all that sort of paid for, um, comms marketing stuff. What else does internal comms do? It activates strategy, activity, marketing, and sales. So, yeah, it activates it. It's like we're running a campaign. We need to let people know about it. Internal comms, off you go. Let people know about it. It drives performance and productivity. So if people feel empowered, if they feel like they know what they're doing, they know what's expected of them, they have the information they need to get on with it, they'll be more productive, they'll be more motivated. They will perhaps perform better than they might do if they feel like they're kind of in the dark and don't really know what's going on, feeling a bit disconnected from things, and yeah, just kind of swimming through their day, as opposed to what could that day look like if they've got all the information they need. They feel that they're connected into the culture of the organisation or wherever they're working, and yeah, they'll just human beings that will step up to the plate, will thrive in that sort of environment. And so it connects people, helps people to see, hear, and know one another. Yeah, we'll come back to that. So I've been, as I say, I've been doing this a long time, 30 plus years. So these commandments are just very sort of high level pillars, if you like, that I think always apply. You might think that things have changed a lot in 3 decades. Honestly, the channels we use have clearly changed and adapted as technology has moved. But truly, in many ways, internal comms is the same. It's the same thing that it was when I started doing it. So ask your audience. Now, comms people, marketing people, we know that. It's always about understanding who you're trying to connect and communicate with, and then you tailor that message in whatever way, shape, and form to that audience. Can be the thing with internal that makes it quite complicated, I might say, because you'll have such a diversity often of audiences. Aim for repeated simplicity. As I said, I think this goes for society in general, frankly, but it is definitely the case with internal comms. It's information overload. So it's a volume. There'll be a lot of things, usually, a lot of things that want to be communicated. And our job as internal comms practitioners is to try to distill it down to the really important stuff, and deliver it in bite-sized ways so that people can actually absorb it and use it. So simplicity, way easier said than done. And I completely understand that. But often it's the only way that you can land a message. And I might say that that is a good engagement strategy, because you often have to manage your colleagues or stakeholders and their expectations around, we want everything and we want all the comms and all the things. And it's like, well, that may not be possible, because actually people have only got 5 minutes in their day to take this in. So how about we do it this way? So yeah, aim for simplicity if you can. Say it in 5 different ways. this is already obvious stuff that you guys will know, but we all absorb information differently. We all have different learning styles. And so you have one message and you try to use as many channels as possible. Say it in different ways. Show, don't tell, and honesty is the best policy. I just suddenly remembered that I dug into it on this slide, so I'm saying. So, yeah, asking, I'll loop back and then we'll finish on the last one. So, asking your audience. So, a really easy and powerful thing is to ask for feedback ask for feedback from the audience. So when I had the Right Message Company and Priceless Communications in my consulting days, I had a process which was groundwork, mind work, legwork. And the reason I had that process was so that when I billed my clients, they would often go, well, why are there so many hours billing for groundwork? And then legwork, it's just like, it's much lighter. And it's because I would take the time to go and talk to people, listen to people, hear what they needed, hear about their problems, why the comms weren't working for them, understand them, their working context and their situation. And when you have that is the gold. Then it would be quite, not easy, but it would be much more straightforward to then put together a communication package that really delivered to what that audience needed. So, yeah, get people's feedback, talk to them. Keep it simple, we talked about that. Say it in 5 different ways, we talked about that. Show, don't tell. So, I'm acutely aware that I'm standing here talking at you right now, but walking the talk is much more effective than preaching. So we'll know that from, say, leaders, that there might be a leader who's really charismatic and really good at engaging and speaking with people, and there might be that leader who just wants to record a 30-minute video and so it's sort of your skill as a comms practitioner to say, well, maybe we could do it this way, so that information is being, there's the walking the talk, it's being exemplified, say, by that leader, rather than them having a long, update or newsletter and video or something like that, where they're really just downloading a whole lot of info at people. And honesty is the best policy. So I'm not one to say that I'm a spin doctor, because I'm really not. I've worked in the PR industry. I have huge respect for it, but I'm not a PR person. Honesty is the best policy. You guys know this. We all know it ourselves, that we know if something is being spun at us. Whereas if you can tell the truth, then that will build hearts, minds, that will build trust with the people of the organisation, whatever size it is. So yeah, tell people as much as you can when you can, and that will build a real strength of not only the culture of that business or organisation, but it will mean that people actually absorb the communication that you send them because they trust what they're reading. Okay, so I kind of second guessed you all a little bit, and I thought about some of the challenges that you might have. And then so the rest, after this scene setting piece, the rest of this presentation is about how, you might address some of these challenges. Now, Gail, I didn't say at the start, and I should have, I'm so sorry. Questions. So if you've got, do put your hand up if there's something that you're just dying to know as I go, but we will have time at the end for questions as well. So sorry, I should have remembered to say that. So you might have other challenges, for example, that you go, yeah, but what about this? So be really keen to hear those at the end. So capacity, it's a volume game. Maybe it's only you and you've got to do 5 other things. How am I meant to deal with all these internal comms? Content. in my experience, getting the content to communicate is actually harder than it sounds. So how do you gather what you need, the right information that you can then work with in a timely manner to spit out the other end? And connection. How do you reach people? How do you connect with people? When people are bombarded with things every day, they're busy, and all of those things. Okay, so let's look at some strategies and solutions that might help. So back to a few more kind of golden rules. So these though are more practical rather than the commandments. So many of you will also work with external communications, and I always say that internal is your first external audience. So bear that in mind, that you want to empower or inform the people of that business. If, say, for example, you could have an example of something being in the media, but it could also be something like a marketing campaign or an awareness campaign. And you want ideally that's communicated internally first before it sort of hits the streets, so that people aren't sitting on the bus on the way to work and then they see something on their phone and go, oh, well, I didn't know about that. So your internal is your first external audience. It can also be a really useful thing for you to keep up your sleeve if you're needing a bit of leverage to say to the people that you work with, hey, this is important. We do need to make sure that our people know about this. Because there is a risk of people not being informed. So tone, think about the values and the culture and the behaviours that really characterise where you are, and infuse your internal comms with those. Whether it's a connection to the community, whether it's about innovation, think about what those things are and put those into your internal comms so that you're really reflecting back to the people of the organisation what it's like, to work here. Make your communications relatable so that people see themselves in the message. You can make internal comms a bit more fun and informative. As I say, put in some of the culture, have a laugh, get people to talk about their pets and the things that they love so that people actually relate to it. And make your comms relatable. It comes back to that. Rather than preaching and just spitting stuff out at people, think about if you're reading, say it's an intranet article, what is going to hook you into it? What is actually going to make you even want to read it? So as I say, energize your comms. Often the way something looks and feels, it comes back to that brand thing. The way something looks and feels is often more important than what it actually says. Because one thing that I think you'll all agree with as well is that people don't, particularly now, people don't read. So did I hear the other day that our attention spans have dropped by another 8 seconds? Thank you, TikTok. But, so people don't read. So but if you can use, and I'll go through ways you can do that, but if you can put the feeling and look into a communication, it's often more important than having a beautifully crafted, worded communication. Not that I doubt your ability to craft a beautifully worded piece as well. So the magic formula is where you can connect the internal comms with the purpose. So what is the purpose of the place that you're where you're working? What are the priorities? So what are the really important things that we need people to know about? And the people. So do people see themselves in this? Okay, so I've talked a bit about brand, and I use brand, it sort of merges with culture as well. So again, it's that experience. I mean, what do they call it? The employee value proposition. There's all the different terms for it, right? But you could start with looking at what is the brand of the place where where I work or where I volunteer. Like, what are we about? What are our brand values? And you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like I say, it's inside out. So you think about what those are and you create internal comms. I call them touchstones. So it's distilling down those values or behaviors, that attitude, that purpose. It could be part of the marketing proposition. What are Nike, just do it. So what's that? Activity, action, innovation. So think about what those things are and develop touchstones for you so that when you're working with internal comms, you can sort of, cross-check back and go, well, hang on, have we made this is a really dull piece because it's actually, it is what it is. We've just got to let people know about this particular topic. But is there a way that we can make it innovative? Or whatever those hallmarks are. And through you coming back and infusing those touchstones, that's again how you help people to kind of feel connected because they recognise the value or the behaviour as being, it's probably why they work in the organisation or wherever you are. You work there because you care about what it stands for. So put that into your comms if you can. So yeah, these touchstones will help you to, oh, sorry, that's what happens when I shouldn't have connected to the internet. Sorry. Teams messages. Right. The tapestry of internal comms. So internal comms it is a bit of a machine. It's a bit of a tapestry. So how do you, that's so annoying. Hang on. If that keeps happening, we might have to turn the Wi-Fi off. Should I do it now? Yeah. Okay, so let's have a look. I thought I'd just map out some of the sort of main things that you have to consider when you're looking with internal comms. So, and this is just classic comms planning, right? But what are you trying to achieve? What do people really need to know? So again, bit of a volume game. Everyone wants comms. We need to tell everyone about this. Do we really need to tell people about this? So, yeah, stick to the key objectives because you'll never ever be able to do it all. It's just too hard. The content informs the channel. So this comes back to when you're thinking about, the audiences internally, but also the content that you're dealing with. The channel, you'll be able to select what will work best for that particular content. So say you've got change. I think we're all familiar with stuff's changing all the time. What is the best way to communicate change? Usually it's exponential. So usually it's a combination of things. You want face-to-face in some shape or form, whatever that means for where you are. So, and then you'll want a direct, so people, I've got email there, you want some form of direct communication so that people receive what they need about the change, because otherwise people will be like, I didn't see that, I didn't read that article and I've missed out on what's happening. So yeah, that's a good example where face-to-face is often people trust their immediate team, they trust who they work with, their manager or whomever that is. Or you might have a leader in the business who people absolutely adore and will follow, So you get that person to talk to them about, look, this is changing, this is why. And then you follow up with written information that they can refer to, which is perhaps emailed to them, so they've got it. Then you might have more operational stuff which is like your newsletters and your updates and things like that. That's just telling, bulletins and things, telling people what they need to know, what to do, that stuff. Channels, use what you've already got. So you don't necessarily, you probably don't have a lot of resources. Email is fine. It is totally fine. Face to face, if you've got a small group and you can do a stand-up like this and then give people a cheat sheet or email a cheat sheet out with the information, it's totally fine. You're communicating with people. You're doing it. Doesn't mean that you need to have big fancy intranet. So use the channels that you've got. You might, perhaps there's a lot of social media that you either do yourself or your colleagues do. So use the social media, use what's already been created and repurpose it for the internal audience. So use what you've got and use a mix. So again, it comes back to understand your audience. What do people engage with? What do they actually read, or what's useful for them? And then that will also help you go, okay, well, for this piece of information, we're going to do this, this, and this. Get creative. So this is where an email can be boring and ugly and inaccessible and full of words, or it can be crafted with headline and image and caption of image and paragraphs and subheadings and colour and form and brand. So you get creative within what you've got. Use what you've got, and try and you probably have to do it yourself, but this is where just simple things like having structure and using the brand elements that already exist will go a long way, rather than just sending out very sort of bland looking things. I'm thinking of emails as I say this. It's just one example. I think you see what I mean. Structure is really, really important to try to fight the fight of information overload. So you'll know from your own browsing behaviour, from the way you absorb information. You're drawn to images, we all click on the video or on the reel or whatever. We won't read a big spiel of text, but we will engage with, say, subheadings that ask a question and tell the story of whatever you're communicating without someone actually having to read the whole thing. You should be able to look at a head. It's like if you're reading, it's, journalism skills, right? So you see the headline, I'll be drawn to, I would always recommend you use an image of some kind. The more the merrier, because usually people will just look at the headline, subheadings, image, and then they'll read a caption. So if you've got a key message that you want to get across, caption the photo with it. And then you might find that someone goes, oh yeah, I didn't really read that article. Oh, but I saw that photo of Gail with her cat, and evidently Gail's been, working with communities doing X, Y, Z. So that's what I mean. You've got to sort of find ways to get someone's attention, and you can do that through structure. I'm the internal comms manager at Stats NZ, and we have fortnightly, we have a Tato Pānui, which is our all people newsletter, and we have the Leaders Pānui, which is the leaders newsletter, and we alternate them on a Thursday. So people know there's a predictability about it. It's Thursday at 2:00, and it's either our Tato Pānui or it's the Leaders Pānui. So they know it's coming. Within those, they're both structured. So the leaders one, I always say, if you're a people leader at Stats NZ and you are too busy to read anything else, which is probably the case, then read that Pānui, and then you'll know what you need to know. And so we structure it where we have things you need to know, things you need to do. So what are the actions you want people to do, that operational stuff, and things to share with your people. So often a challenge of internal comms is the cascade. Some leaders are really good at communicating and some just aren't. It's just not their strength. So one job that you can do through structuring something like a newsletter is to say to leaders, you need to tell your people this, and you need to tell them by this date. And then a busy manager can just go, okay, cool. Okay, I'll make a note. I need to do that. Right. The all people Pānui, Atato Pānui, that is structured slightly differently. Well, it's things to know, things to do. And then we've got our people and work. And that's where we put in all the fun stuff. We run on Fridays, we do a photo newsletter, like a photo newsletter, which is called Snaps NZ, for obvious reasons, because it's at Stats NZ. But that will often have in there all, like people profiles, all sorts of things. And so we'll link all those types of intranet articles or campaigns or whatever. We'll put that into our people and work. We have it structured at the bottom of the Pānui so that it's like, if you eat your broccoli, you get your dessert. It's you read through the rest of it and people probably skip down, but you've got the fun stuff about the people at the bottom. So use structure. It will save you an inordinate amount of time, because the other thing, and it's not here, but I will come back to it further as we go, but if you've got structure like that, it also means that you can template things. So I'll go into it now. Say it's an email, say it's an intranet article. So it comes down to that challenge of how do I get all the information? I mean, it might be that, you get invited to a meeting and these people are all talking, and then at the end, because you've been there, they're like, oh, cool, so you can do an article now, you can communicate that. And you're probably really good at taking notes, but first of all, you might not have time to go to all these meetings. Second of all, it's like, well, give me the information. You then have to go through okay, can you send me this, and this that we talked about? And then I'll come back with a draft. So one way to kind of skip ahead with that is to have templates. So briefing forms, a more detailed briefing form. Say it's for, someone goes, oh, I'd really love to do can we do a profile story on blah, blah? Sure, here's the template. Part of that will require them to send you a photo. If there's a quote, they can talk to the person that they're quoting, send you the information so that you've got that content. And then you can go, okay, cool, I've got the content now. I can do the internal comms from that. But yeah, it's often really difficult to get that content in a form that's easy for you to work with, that without it taking a huge amount of your time to translate and to sort of pull out of the different people that are involved. So get the business doing a bit of the work for you. So timing and sequencing, yeah, I talked about that with the Pānui example. So use routine and sequencing and provide reference points. So, you might not have an intranet, but you may have a website that you can direct people to for more information. So, yeah, keep the content as short as you can and simple as you can. Refer them to, further information. The other thing is that often internally it's hard for people to know where to go. If you've got a really good intranet, it's a bit easier, but they'll often be like, well, where do I go to get that information? So if in your internal comms you've got a feedback mechanism and you've got, refer to this, and if you've got questions, go and talk to this person, then you're creating that kind of 360 loop for people where they get what they need, they know where they can go to get more information if they need it or if they've got questions. And then so there's just a bit more on the channel. So face-to-face, we respond better to face-to-face than anything else, which is why, we'll watch stuff on YouTube of people because we're human. That's what we sort of engage with. So if you've got the ability to do face-to-face, use it. Newsletters and things, we've talked about that. Intranet informs, engages, empowers. If you've got the ability to utilise an intranet, great. It does a few things. Obviously, it's also about a reference point as well as the sort of the news things. It's almost like someone once described it to me. It's like a concierge, the intranet. You should be able to, as a new employee, you go and look at an intranet and you should be able to find out about the place where you're working. How do I take leave? What do I do? That kind of stuff. Photography. So photos are your secret weapon. I talked about the Snaps NZ channel that we have at Stats. So, this sounds very cynical, but, I bet more people read or engage with Snaps NZ than anything else that we do. And we do a lot of internal comms there because people, we like looking at images. We connect with one another. So use them. If you've got them for your brand, for marketing and sales, then use them. And, social media, use those assets internally. It's the same principle as marketing and sales. We engage with the beautiful, designed, clear things, the A3, where everything is beautifully laid out and simple and structured. So use photography. And as I say, social works for internal as well. Because,
Are you talking about things like WhatsApp groups? Because I'm thinking for volunteer groups.
Yes. Well, exactly. Absolutely. Yeah, that's right. That's that whole piece of use what you've got. And so, exactly, Gail. It's about saying, well, what have we got and how can we use that channel to connect with people? Yes.
What kind of language do you want to use? Because I know it's for charities you can get Slack for free, but it's a big game changer for all non-profits.
Yeah.
So you can use build your internet into Slack. But what kind of language do you want to use between your emails and all of these different channels?
Yeah, so this is where you come back to those touchstones. So you develop a storytelling style or a narrative for your internal that acknowledges the experience, the brand experience, which are these, like Slack, these various ways that the organisation, that people interact, and then you say, okay, so our tone can be a bit more informal, or it can be sorry, I'm just got too many thoughts going through my head at the same time. You take those those hallmarks and you use that as your tone. So it might be, we can be friendly but clear. We can be culturally, inclusive. So that might mean if we're culturally inclusive, we always have, there's different, there's bilingual, you have some of these rules, if you like, that guide your internal comms. And so if you're taking your social content, you will then be like, okay, does this meet those? Let's have a look at the cross-reference using the touchstones. Do we just need to tweak the tone a bit, or does it work? And yeah, that would be the approach that I would say that you take. That you get clear about how you want to do things internally, and then you reference back to those sort of guidelines with the content that you're repurposing. Yeah. Does that make sense?
In terms of imagery, essentially you work with stats, you have to keep these figures a lot in your imagery, but obviously people focused is better or less, or how do you
Yes, so you get, it's really interesting because, and we used to say this when we were at Lynn's as well, that, quite cerebral, detail people, kaimahi that work there, but they're still people. And so this is where having the reference, and yes, we'll use infographics and things like that with data, but it's interesting because it's actually more the insights and the storytelling that is the piece that really engages people. And so it's fascinating because you would think that audience would be much more about the numbers, but you give them reference points to go in and dig into the numbers, because there's definitely people that want to, absolutely. But for the organisation, it's still the same rules apply. It's really interesting, and it's the thing that really ignites people a lot of the time at, say, Stats NZ, is that how are we influencing and helping the country through the insights and the statistics that we provide. So again, it comes back to people. How are we helping? How are we making a difference? How are we, empowering decision makers to have accurate information? And so it's actually much more about the storytelling than it is about the numbers. Yeah. Okay. Right. So, tips: use your brand from the inside out. I feel like I've kind of done this to death. Translate the brand for your people. So they are your brand ambassadors, right? I talked about the experience piece. So use that to your advantage. Do people profiles that you may, often there's people profiles, you use them, say, on LinkedIn or, something like that, but run them internally first. Coming back to that point about the touchstones, your tone for internal might be a bit more friendly. So you might run a bit more of a detailed people profile on someone internally that gets them to talk about what they like to do outside of work and what their pets are and what organisational values they connect with, why they do what they do. But then you might run something that's much more focused on the work they're contributing that you run on, say, LinkedIn. So, remember that your people are the brand, and so don't be afraid to really make use of that with your internal comms. Actually, and that photo there was from a photo shoot we did at Stats NZ. So we, and you have to do this very carefully, obviously, because you have to get people's consent and they sign a waiver form. But we have photo shoots of our people that we use for our communications. So, sometimes those stock images, people won't be able to relate to those stock images because they might be, say, purchased from America or somewhere like that, or they might have seen them used by another organisation. So, where you can, it's not always possible, but try to get people to send you photos. Use what you have internally to then populate your comms. What content goes to what channel? So, it's really important that you do that sort of translation step of going, what's going to be the best way of communicating this? So be strategic. Yes.
What about the generational impact?
Yeah.
Be mindful of that in
Yes.
organisations and what people respond to. I know that speaks to the channel, but
Yeah.
if you have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, great question. So this is the inclusion and diversity piece, isn't it? I mean, there are a huge range of people and cultures and, neurodiversity and all sorts of things. This is where internal comms, our audiences are often quite complicated. That is about say the same thing in 5 different ways. That does really, really help. Having relatable information, so it's clear, it's not trying to be fancy, it's clear, there's graphic as well as copy, so that people can then relate and interpret that as they, in their own way. And part of the tone is to give people permission to do that. It's like, here's the information, you'll absorb it the way you'll absorb it. So you could take, when I say something in 5 different ways, say we look at generation, we've got the TikTok generation. So if we're going to do a video, it's probably a good idea to do one that's fairly quick and that, say the younger generation will pick up on it quickly. You then might want to have more detail so that people that this might not be their generation, it could be just the way they absorb information. They want that detail. So yeah, I think it's about trying to take that message and put it through different formats. And also evolving with the times. So again, asking your audience. So talk to those people in the organisation and say to them, does this land with you or do your eyes glaze over? Like, what could we do that would reach you? And they might go, oh, you did this thing the other week where whatever it was, and that was cool. Can you, and so and then you might have some content come through that is for that particular audience, and so you go, okay, we know that this topic is going to be they're our primary audience, so we know that this channel works, so that's how we'll do it. Yeah. Okay. So make it about the people, talk to them, make it about them, put them in the comms, they'll engage with it. If they see a photo, they will, I know it sounds ridiculously simple, but they are far more likely to engage than if it's just a whole lot of simple question and answer. This is also this template thing. So we do people profiles a lot because they're really easy to do, because literally you've got a question and answer format that you send to someone and you get them to send you photos, and you've then got you've then got it there and you can then spit it out, and people love reading about other people. What you can do is profile people that are working on, so there's a really important campaign or something happening, so you will profile the person who, it doesn't have to be the leader or the person who's leading that campaign. It could be one of the people who's down in the grassroots getting it done. And so you do a people profile, you just email it to them, and then you're highlighting through that people profile that piece of work or that campaign or whatever it is that you're really trying to get across. So honestly, probably running a people profile will have more impact for you than the big shiny launch article or whatever it is that you do. Still do the launch thing, but the people profile, you'll probably be surprised at how much more uptake you'll have with that. So don't be afraid to use your people. Sometimes it seems like, it seems too good to be true. It seems too simple, but it works. It works. So make it about the people. Use the people to your advantage. So, some of the potential challenges that you might have. So, capacity. How on earth are you meant to deal with it all? Come back to those touchstones, those principles that you operate by. It helps you prioritize. You have to prioritize. You have to. You can't tell everyone everything. It just doesn't work. You know that. Use your marketing and external comms if you can. Use what you've got. Repeat, repurpose. You might need to, to respond to that gentleman's question, you might need to tweak it slightly for internal, or it might be as simple as you give people advance notice. Sometimes it's as simple as that. Just going, hey guys, did you know we've got this campaign coming up next week? The reason for it is this. This is what you're going to see. Here it is. Something as simple as that. So repeat, repurpose what's already being produced. Use your leaders and advocates. So small C comms, as I call it, or the engagement stuff. So if you've got really influential, charismatic people within the wherever you work, wherever you volunteer, use those people to talk with others, to run stand-ups. Maybe they run an information briefing. If they're a good speaker, they don't have to be senior. I mean, sometimes you get really good leaders as well, but get the subject matter expert along to talk to people. Again, face to face, if you can do that, it's really useful for us as humans. It's how we like listening to each other. And then from your job as the internal comms practitioner, you might, Gail's done a presentation, she's had a question and answer, and then there's a takeaway. So you don't have to do a huge amount of comms work, but they've got, say there's question and answers, or say there's a slide pack or something like that. You give them that, and then you've actually communicated probably quite a lot of things, but you haven't had to spend hours and hours and hours putting together an internal communication. Channels, we've talked about channels. So content, templates, colour by numbers. The templates are your friend, processes are friend too. Try to get some of the heavy lifting done for you. I think I have talked a bit about that. Systems. So have a mailbox or a point of contact. Reference material back so that there's a loop for the reader, for kaimahi within, your organisation. Have that really clear system so that people go, where do I go if I want to find out about this, or I've got an idea for this? Okay, so there's a mailbox they go to, So systems, be nice and organised. That will make, it's also that thing of someone will come to you and go, we've got this thing happening and I should have told you about it. It's actually happening tomorrow. Right? Can you do this, this and this? And it's like, well, you could have told me like a month ago or a week ago would be good. But at least if you have systems, then you can fall back on those systems and be like, okay, well, this is what we can do. We've got, these are our communication channels. So here's a template. If you can fill out the briefing form and tell us what you need, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So get even just really simple, organised systems, prioritisation, and those systems will also help the business to do their own prioritising. Everyone, and I totally understand this, everyone thinks their thing is most important. Sometimes it just isn't, but there are ways through having your systems, your different channels, your prioritisation, that you can be like, well, we can't we're not going to be running like the full bells and whistles, but this is what I can do. How about we just organise for you to do an information session about that next week? And if you could put together some, the key content, then I can do a quick cheat sheet or some slides for you. How about we do that rather than doing the big thing tomorrow that they want? So yeah, templates, like structure, templates, having your systems, and then that will make it so much easier for you to then have that conversation to very gently perhaps push back or just manage expectations. And connection. So I think I've kind of talked a lot about this. People engage with people first. Human nature is very much at the heart of internal comms. And people tell stories. They want to know what's in it for them. What do you want me to do? So remember that when you're putting something together. Perhaps in your template, you have that as a key question. What do you want people to do? Why do people, why is this important? Why do people care about this? Get them to define it. And then you can communicate that back to people. So you can say to people, the reason we're doing this, the why, this is why we're doing this. This is why we want you to take half an hour out of your busy week to do this, is because, yeah. So that builds the connection. Well, lots of things build the connection, making it about the people, because people feel part of. It might be a really big organisation. I mean, say I think about, for example, back in the day, the Dairy Board. So they, I mean, Fonterra still is, but global organisation. We did a lot of work for their human resources area, and they had thousands of people in all different countries, different contexts, cultural contexts, all that stuff. And so what were the human elements that everyone could relate to? Because we're all people. And so it's remember that you're in the people business, and that yes, you're trying to communicate a whole lot of information, but if you can bring it back to the people, that's the storytelling part. We were talking about that earlier. That's actually the storytelling part of it. You may be asked, I know I certainly hear this a lot these days, the storytelling piece. And it's really about the people piece, the story, isn't it? It's about, say, if we think about Stats NZ, what is how are these data and insights helping our country? That's the story. So how do we tell that story? Yeah, it always comes back to the people. And so, yeah. Yes.
Brilliant.
Oh, thank you.
Reminded